Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Vibing with Sleazy, the podcast. This is season 6, episode 9. I want to thank everybody for listening, tuning in, and downloading. It's been a great season so far. I appreciate all the feedback and listens. The last episode I did with Josh Wright was about over a week ago. I started a new job, been battling a head cold, so just kind of took a break and got myself recovered. But I'm back for y'all and got a special episode today. So, this guest is actually coming live from Hendersonville, Tennessee. He has been on the show before, actually shot the episode in Hendersonville, Tennessee with him. And then his wife, Christine, also, who was on the first episode of this season. She's a fan of the show and a contributor to the show. So it's great we can all get together and do this. So I love having Christine on the show and I love having Jim on. So my special guest is none other than Jim Dalton. How you doing?
No, doing all right. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing great, brother. Doing great. So, Jim is one of the smartest people I know. I think I said that on the last time we recorded. He does a lot of great things, and he is a cook, barbecue master, I would say, on his spare time. And I've had the food, and it's absolutely amazing. So, I wanted to talk to Jim about barbecue. I want to talk to him about cooking, kind of ask him some questions and some opinions. And then, of course, his wife Christine wants me to ask him a little bit about emo music and get into his music favorites. So I'm excited to have this episode. So, Jim, what you been up to, brother?
Oh, just living the dream, trying to keep myself busy, all things considered. We talk on a pretty regular basis. You know what
Oh
we
yeah,
got going on.
oh yeah. We talk daily. We talk daily. We got a group chat. We call it the Bixby Gang. So we got a really cool group chat. So how's the dogs? Before we get into cooking.
Well, Summer's on Trazodone right now because we had some thunderstorms, and she's our train walker coonhound. For those of you that may or may not have seen any of Sleazy's posts. I think she's been on there a couple times.
Oh yeah.
I'm not on the Facebook, but I see you take the pictures and I'm sure like they get posted and stuff like that. But yeah, she doesn't do good with thunder, lightning type of stuff. But Turk, he's just solid, all things considered. He's like, as long as I'm up on the bed on the couch and I'm watching TV, I'm fine. Like
Yeah.
that's all he cares about. That and food, obviously. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
they're good, man.
But I'm glad they're good. Great dogs. Actually, got a story to share before I get into our episode. So, on Wednesday, there was a dog discovered named Hank. He was 2 months old, discovered in the west end of Louisville. Me, my friend Stephanie, and my friend Hunter, we all three came to the rescue, got him picked up. He was eating scraps and running the streets and 2 months old. He was a boxer pit mix and got him to the vet on Wednesday. No chip. So shout out to Stephanie Parker. She is actually going to take him and own him. So he's sweet as can be. He was named after Hank Hill. So he's doing good.
Oh,
Yeah. Woo! So they took him, Hunter and Stephanie. They took him to the vet on Friday, and turns out he's good. He just needs to eat some more food. But Stephanie's got him doing well, and he got a little rain jacket because it's rainy in Louisville as well. So he's getting used to it. But you can tell he can feel the love, and I'm actually going to after the show go visit him. And I always like when he curls up because you can tell he just feels safe. So it's a good situation. So I want to shout out to Hank the dog. So there you go. So Hank, hope you're listening. So, anyways, so Jim, you have a grill, and if you want to share with the listeners, what is your grill?
yeah, it's a Kamado Joe, and for those of you that may not know what a Kamado grill is, you probably heard of, and if not, just Google it. Big Green Egg. They are ceramic grills. They have two components. They have the base and then they have the dome. And typically, and I'll just kind of rant on this,
Yeah.
and if it's too much, just stop me.
No,
But
dude. Nice.
typically the way that they work is they retain heat so well. They're very efficient grills, and they're also very versatile. However, the downside is they're also heavy as shit. As you can imagine, something of that size, and you've seen how like tall that grill is. It's about up to here, chest size. I'm 5'10". So I, do whatever kind of gauge you can figure out from the stream here. But it's a very heavy grill, but it's super efficient. There's actually a funny Family Guy reference of like Quagmire asked Peter to come over and help move his grill, and they're moving it on the like back patio, and it just falls over and breaks apart. Which is really what happens whenever that type of thing does happen. Thankfully, I haven't had any friends of mine have that issue. I've thankfully not had that issue, but yeah, it's a very feasible thing. But also, it's a great theft deterrent. Nobody's going to come and take this grill off of your back patio and run away with it. Good luck.
Yeah, you got to either be like Brock Lesnar or some crazy bodybuilder to even try to lift that thing. So let me ask you this: how many different sizes are there of these grills, like that you can get?
Yeah, so it varies by brand. So Kamado Joe, they only have two sizes. They have an 18-inch diameter grill and then a 24 diameter inch grill. I don't know exactly what Big Green Egg has. You've seen them in the Ace here in town. Like that one is massive. I think that's like upwards of 30 plus inches or something like that. But they make them in various sizes. They also make one that is smaller, and I think that's 12 inches in diameter, but that's designed to be like a portable grill or one that you use as an auxiliary cooker, in addition with something else, because you only have, this much space to work with. So there's not a lot that you can really fit on it. But I know plenty of people that say, hey, I have this other smaller grill for things like, oh, I did low and slow on my big grill, and now I want to sear this steak or something like that, or prep something else. They just want that extra versatility.
Now, when you're looking into grills and getting into this and stuff, um, we have talked about this many a times, talking about the different meats you can cook and all the different options. So, when it comes to meat, what is your easiest meats to cook? Not just for you, but just in general for like overall barbecuers, or and the hardest. What like give me a range of your basic.
So yeah, that's a really good question too, because there are certain things that are incredibly forgiving that you can screw up just every single step of the way and still get a pretty decent product out at the end. And one of those is pork shoulder. If season it the night before, which is called overnight dry brining, the liquid equivalent of that is like if you take like a chicken or a turkey and you have a big tub and you just put a bunch of salt and water in there and let the salt penetrate overnight. That's brining via liquid, but this is just doing the same-ish type of thing with just letting that seasoning sit on the actual surface of that shoulder overnight in the refrigerator. So you can pull that out. You can, just as long as you make sure the temperature is where it needs to be and it has a certain feel whenever you're actually going to pull it off of the grill. One of the important things that most people think, oh, I can just tear right into something. It's like, no, 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 no. Wrap it up, let it sit, put it in a cooler, let it rest for a couple hours. And those types of like things you can really say like it would still be okay if you just pulled it apart right then and there,
Yeah.
but you're gonna have it's you're losing so much of the moisture that's trying to get back into that meat during that time. And so if you want to say like, okay, that's the easiest, it's the depending upon how much it is, how much it weighs, it can range in time from 6 to 12 plus hours, depending upon what you have. Most of mine that I've done for that specific cook, and I've done that several times. One, because I wanted to do it. Anytime I do any of these cooks that are longer in time or it's something new I've never done before, I always do one just by myself, just to know, okay, cool. Did I get the outcome that I had wanted out of it? And you kind of figure out like, oh, there are certain little gotchas that you may need to avoid in that process. But if you want to go for things like that are in the mid, and there, I think the middle is really where you're going to see like a lot of like pretty standard stuff that you would see kind of across the board. Well, there's a dozen and a half ways to make burgers. You can make smashed burgers. You can do just regular patties and season both sides. There's a variety of different ways to do it. But if we're looking at the far end of like what's the most complex, it's going to be the ones that take the most time. The one that I say is the most complex, but I have some alternatives that I'll throw out there and kind of say here, I would prefer to do this for a variety of reasons, and I'll kind of
Mm.
unpack that. But brisket, whenever you're looking at a brisket, there's several things in the way that you got to make sure that you do right. You got to trim the fat cap. You got to make sure that you're not making any huge divots in it throughout the entire time. You have to season it, make sure that you season it overnight. Like I mentioned, these are all the easy parts in it.
Mm.
But whenever it comes to the actual time of, oh, now I'm going to need to cook this low and slow for a very long amount of time, there's a lot of things that can happen, right? Like if you start that thing at like, say, 6 a.m., it could be a 12 plus hour cook, and then you still have to let that thing rest for a few hours.
Yeah.
And so, what a lot of people tend to do, and this is something that I am myself, I do not do because I'm just super paranoid. People will set something up overnight and let it cook overnight. So that way, whenever they get up in the morning, and they go and check on their grill and check to make sure, hey, if everything's gone according to plan, great. They're in a good position. They can make sure the temperatures are there. They can pull it off. They can let it rest, and they have plenty of rest time to let those juices just soak back into that meat up until dinner, or an early dinner or late lunch, kind of territory, just depending upon the size of whatever they're working with. However, the one thing is there's a lot of risk there, right? So a lot can happen if you're not watching that. And where we live, we live in a condo or a townhome, and I don't want to be responsible for the firefighters coming out here in the middle
Yeah.
of the night and saying,
Exactly.
like, why were you not attending to your grill type of situation. And plus, I just don't want to like run the risk of ruining, a 70, $80, cut of meat that's just got, cooked, even if everything didn't go 100%, but it just got too hot, dried it out. It's now just this, rock hard piece of meat.
Probably
Um,
safer to monitor the temperature as well too while you're up. Like, I mean, I know you like to check and see. I mean, I think that
yeah,
that would be that would definitely be a risk too. It could go the temperature way that you don't want it to.
a lot of people who do that have wireless thermometers. So they put a probe into the meat, and that way, they can get a reading on their phone.
Mm.
They can set up alerts on their phone and stuff like that. And while I do have, wireless thermometers, the only reason that I do that is because it gives me a sense of time.
Mm.
That's where I'm trying to understand, okay, here's the mark I want to hit. But beyond that, there are a few things for different kinds of cooks. Like if specifically, if we talk about the one replacement that I think is probably better than brisket, which is beef ribs, and
Ooh.
you do get a bit of the same type of consistency and flavor and texture that you would get out of a brisket, except in a much shorter amount of time. Specifically on the basis of just like it's a smaller cut of meat, and it's just me and Christine and the dogs, so it's not like I'm making for like a
A feast.
large
Yeah.
gathering or anything like that. But
Do you feel like when you now I've had your wings, they're incredible on there. That's a smaller portion, smaller pieces. Do you find the focus of like a larger slab of meat easier? Do you find monitoring smaller like wings as a easier way?
I think it's different challenge, not challenge. Well, I guess you could call it challenges, depending upon how you wanted to word it. But it's more you're looking for different types of things. So if we're talking poultry specifically, you've had smoked wings that I've done with just your standard charcoal smoking wood, and I'm just waiting for it to hit a specific temperature to make sure it's food safe. And
Hmm.
then if you run that over a bit further, that's whenever you want to make sure, okay, cool, this is going to get to the fall off the bone territory.
Yeah.
But whenever you're looking at something like pork belly, and pork belly is one of those things where, yeah, I can hit the temperature and I know that it's food safe, it's good to go. But if I don't take my, temperature probe, that's like, the handheld one with the little spike in it that I just, let sink into those pieces of meat, if it doesn't feel like it's just about to fall right through, I know I've got some more time. I know that those need to go a bit further. So there's a little bit of nuance there whenever you're looking at that type of thing.
Now
And
let
and
me
it's
ask.
different between, like pork and beef, which those kind of align with the same type of feel. But for example, if I were to do like a whole rotisserie chicken,
Ooh,
I know for a fact, like that temperature probe that I have in there, I'm only monitoring for time. The moment that it's okay, I don't need to worry about feel. I wrap that sucker up and let it rest.
yeah.
So that's a little bit of the difference between those two types of things.
Well, let me ask you this. So, with just your experience overall, what have you felt like you've like mastered and feel real comfortable with, and what is and it's kind of a two-parter. What is something challenging that you want to take on in like 2025 to grill?
Yeah, so the big thing that's just kind of a constant reminder is that these things take time and to be patient. And, whenever it comes to making sure that things are progressing accordingly, the one thing that you probably didn't see me do a ton of, with the exception, and I'll kind of delineate this out, but if I have something on the grill, if you're looking, you're not cooking. And that's the thing to kind of keep in mind. You want to keep that closed so that way the heat stays in, it's a consistent cook. And the only exception to that are for things like beef ribs or pulled pork, because one, I'm going to be spraying that about every hour with a mixture of 1 to 1 apple cider vinegar and water. And what that does is that just helps that bark, all that seasoning and that smoke ring stay on the actual meat. So that way you're not losing any of that flavor there. And what can tend to happen is if you're not watching it, and it's a weird cut of meat, because no two are going to be the same.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll get pretty consistent kind of across the board, but you could have a little divot or valley in it just because of how it was processed, and you weren't there with the butcher whenever they did it, so what are you going to do? But those types of things can prevent bark from forming because it starts to pull in a little bit of the liquid and fat that's rendering out of it. So you want to keep an eye on that, but it's just the patience of it all, and understanding that things are proceeding. And one of the other things that I've kind of learned in this whole process is that the one thing with Kamado grills, and I will tell everybody this, is that once you actually load everything into that base, all of your charcoal, you get it up to temp, you load in all your other stuff, and to give folks a little bit of an idea of what you actually are doing when you're trying to smoke on one of these, you have the heat coming up from the bottom. It's a live fire. And what you want is not the heat to cook the food. You do want the heat to cook the food, but you
Yeah.
want to try and keep that direct heat away from it. It's like creating, these layers that block that heat from directly getting to it. And what you're getting is the smoke and that indirect heat. That's what you want. You want that heat to come around those deflector plates and actually, just be all around that meat that you're cooking. So that way it imparts that flavor. That's why you add, little bits of smoking wood in there, or chunks of smoking wood in this case. But if you run out of fuel, you have to figure out, different ways to kind of, get around that. It's either pull your, meat off, set it aside, pull everything out, put more fuel in, light it again, and then put everything back. Or you can finish it in the oven or something like that. Like you've already exposed it to enough of that flavor that it should be, okay. Now, the one thing that I will say to loop back to what are some things that I'm thinking about in 2025, which is trying to explore the longer, tail of these cooks and trying to get to a point of understanding what fuels work better, because there are different types of charcoal out there, as you can imagine. I'm sure if any of your listeners have gone to like a Walmart or anything, you see the charcoal briquettes of different brands and blah 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 blah. Well, the same thing goes for lump charcoal, which is bigger blocks of charcoal that burn slower. And that's what they're intended to do. You like the smaller pieces will burn pretty quick, and then you're kind of left with a bunch of ash, and that's not good for your airflow inside of these grills, which air plus fire equals good. You don't want to, choke off air and then you're not going to have any fire. So
Exactly.
it's one of those deals that I just need to kind of continue to master what that looks like for those, 12 plus hour cooks, to understand like, okay, cool. I know what works best. I can watch all the videos online about how to do this, but it's just until you do it specifically where you are geographically, especially with any kind of weather that's going on. Like I mentioned earlier, air is important, and if there's wind about, it can affect things. It's an interesting kind of game to play.
Now, when you talk about, we talked about charcoal there, but when you talk about wood, Um, so what is the wood like called that you would buy for cooking or using these kind of grills? Like, is it just called like burning? I mean, what is it called?
It doesn't necessarily have any kind of like connotation as far as like grilling or smoking or anything like that. You can go to any hardware store, generally Ace, Home Depot, Lowe's. They all have a section where they have lump charcoal. Your mileage may vary as far as what else they have. Tractor Supply also has it, but uh, the types that I have hickory blocks and hickory chips, and I'll explain why I have hickory chips here in a moment. Um, Apple, cherry, pecan, and I have chips for all those too. And part of the reason why I have the chips is that the way that the live fire inside of a Kamado grill works is that, obviously you have the fire, it's going up, it's creating that heat inside the dome above to cook the food, but also at the same time, ashes, coals, everything falls to the bottom.
Hmm.
And there's an ash drawer at the bottom of this grill that I can pull out and see where those embers are. So if I feel like I'm like, well, I've already eaten through all of the wood that was in there, I can see where the fire is basically happening and drop some additional chips in there and then slide that back in to add a little bit more to it. And I can do that about every hour to continue
Can you mix
adding.
and match chips? Can you mix and match them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for different cooks, like usually I'll throw in either one or two blocks of, hickory, and then depending upon if I want what kind of flavor I want, it will either be cherry, pecan, or apple.
Ooh.
And those each have a different, they're generally pretty good about the meats that I pick, but there are some things that just they don't, blend very well with foods. Like if you were to do some cold smoking, which is basically say, I have a pellet tube, which is just a metal tube. You put, pellets in there, and that's kind of a different ball of waxes. Like this is kind of mixing and matching the different types of disciplines or different types of equipment because a pellet grill, you get these pellets in a bag and it's basically just the same thing. It's wood pellets that are mashed together. You put it into the hopper and it feeds and then actually does the same thing. It's more of an automatic type of thing, but that's not one thing that I was really interested in whenever I was looking at grills myself because I was like, well, I read the nightmares of like the fire actually went all the way back into the hopper and destroyed their entire grill. And
Oh
I was like,
God.
oh no, I'm not chancing that. That
Yeah, that
doesn't
don't
seem like
sound
my
fun.
game. But if you get those pellets used in that grill and put it in a pellet tube, you can basically use a Kamado grill to cold smoke things like cheese. And what I mean by cold smoke is that you don't want any heat whatsoever. You just want the smoke. It's the equivalent of like, hey, you want to smoke some salmon and you don't want it to actually cook it. You just want to impart that smoky flavor to it.
Okay, cool, cool. So I didn't even think about fish and salmon and stuff. That would be really good too on the grill. I've actually had like salmon on like a wood plank and stuff, and it's been
Yep.
very, very good, very tasty. Now would you for the listeners and stuff, what are some you and I love talking about this off the air, like spices and different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you and I have actually gone to Ace together and picked up some spices and stuff. So what are some of your recommendations and some of your brands that you like to go with?
Yeah, I will start with the generic mix for generally any kind of barbecue that you would want to do. This works on pork, this works on beef, it can work on chicken, it works all across the board, and it's very simple. It's pepper, salt, garlic, onion powder, paprika, and cayenne pepper.
Ooh,
And yeah, so all of that is, and I can, send that to you and you can post it on whatever, but so that way people aren't like trying to crazily write something down. But those those ingredients are generally a great baseline. They work really well. You can tailor it with the cayenne pepper, dial it back if you have somebody in your household that's a little sensitive to that kind of thing, or you can, up it and make it a little bit more, spicy, no pun intended. But that's generally one that I say, hey, start there and just see because you're going to find a lot of the spices on the market are pretty similar. Like there's not a lot of difference unless you're just like you have a nuanced perfect palate that you can taste the difference. That being said, one of the companies that I really enjoy is Meat Church. They have a lot of great seasons. Those are the ones that we got from Ace that one time that we went. Um, then I just picked up the two that were there because I was like, oh, I need some more of this, and I'm just gonna get this for funsies.
Yeah,
But
and they got cool
yeah,
bottles. They got cool little bottles too. Like, yeah.
yeah, and that's also one of the hacks that I recommend for folks is that if you get one of these larger, seasoning, pre-made things that you can buy at the store, and you get through it, save that bottle.
Yeah.
Because then if you make your own, then you already have something. I was a dum dum and got rid of mine, and then I was in a position of, oh, how I need a shaker, so I had to go out and buy one, which was I was just like, well, lesson learned. Bye.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's really cool about this whole thing is because it's all learning and it's all mastering it your own way. What I've really noticed lately on spices, just looking at them myself and stuff, people really like to add garlic in there, and garlic is a big influence in a lot of cooking, and it a lot of times is in these seasons and spices. I uh I always growing up, I loved Lowry's seasoned salt that like.
Yep.
Love putting on a burger. I mean, absolutely goes perfect with steak fries, and it just really hits. So I just love a good season. I love how it tastes, and I think like you said, I mean, it has such an impact on the final product. It's very important, and it's important to have a good one.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes back to, the like, oh, people don't season their food type of situation. It's like, yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
When
Oh
something
yeah.
comes out, you're just like, that's a chicken breast that has nothing on it.
This is so bland. I need like 40 sauces. Um, so let's get into sauces. So what are some sauces that you like? And also, again, recommend some brands and like some things that I know. Let's do this. Let's talk about sauces. Then I want to talk about marinades.
Yeah. The sauce that you actually brought down was really good. I
Montgomery and
actually,
barbecue. Shout out
yep,
to Montgomery and barbecue.
I used that on the last batch of wings that I did, which I got a new rotisserie basket, which basically hooks up to. And I know I haven't made a rotisserie chicken while you've been down, but basically my grill has an attachment where I can throw this in there, and it creates like a rotisserie style thing that I can actually put chicken on. I can do all kinds of stuff with it, but it has an attachment where you get a basket and you can put the wings in there, and those wings just rotate, and as their fat renders out and falls onto the fire, it just creates more and more flavor. So I did that with all of the, like, probably like 3 pounds ish of wings. Pulled them off once they were done. Sauced about a third of them, or maybe it was half. I think it was half with that, and then half with uh, Frank's Red Hot Buffalo sauce,
Ooh.
and put them back on. Let them crisp up on the actual grill after that, and then they were good to go. So that one was really solid. I thought they had a really good flavor profile. It's not over the top sweet. That's always something that kind of gets me. And every palate is different. Everybody tastes different. But I'm just generally not a big sweets person.
Hmm.
But
There's a sweet and tangy about that Montgomery and barbecue sauce. It's really good.
100%.
Yeah, got that sweet and tangy, and it's such a good sauce. Heated up. That's what when you're at the restaurant. And so, just for the listeners, Montgomery and Barbecue, it actually is a restaurant in Cincinnati, Ohio, but it actually started in another place in Ohio. It's got a few in Ohio, a few in Kentucky, and it's amazing. The one I love going to is actually the Boathouse. It's on the Ohio River. It's really close to the stadiums in downtown Cincinnati. You get reservations. They got sports memorabilia. They got Shaquille O'Neal's shoes. They actually have the piece of ear that Tyson bit off Holyfield in that fight in a baseball case. It looks like a Grippo's seasoned chip. So it's just a cool place. Great place to eat. View over the river. And then the food is incredible. I mean, it's actually kind of luxury dining. Got valet. You get in there. And what I usually like to do, I'll get chicken and get shrimp, and then they'll bring you your Montgomery and barbecue sauce heated. But another sauce that they like to make a plum mustard sauce. So they take like a warmer honey Dijon mustard, mix it with plum sauce, and then you kind of stir it up and dip your shrimp in that. So just their sides, their sweet potato, everything they do is just world class. And then they got these little candles at the table, and it just you just know you're in Montgomery when you see that. And Bob Hope, the famous actor, legendary actor, he's actually the symbol with his cigar. So when you walk up to Montgomery Inn, they got a pig smoking a cigar right there at the steps. So great place to get barbecue, great place to get a souvenir or just go check out some sports memorabilia if you're in the area. But you can also get Northern Kentucky and other areas of Ohio. Um, I've always been telling Jim and Christine that I wanted to bring it down, so I was finally glad I got them a bottle of sauce. My parents are actually going to go visit a bunch of friends that they haven't seen in forever, and they're going to Montgomery on Monday night. So my mom called me today while I was at work, and she's very, very excited about going to Montgomery Inn. And I told her, I'm like, who wouldn't be excited? I mean, it's my favorite place on earth. So great restaurant. So just to let everybody know that that's what it is. But so what are some other sauces that you recommend besides Frank's and that Montgomery Inn?
Yeah, and it's expensive. I won't BS anybody about that. The truff sauce. I don't know
Ooh,
if you've
I've heard
seen
of that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super expensive, and the only reason I got it was because it was on sale at Costco.
Mhm.
And that like the four trial bottles, which are usually like in the $36 to $40 range,
Oh
was
wow,
on sale.
they're at that price range. Okay.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
absurdly high because I walked by it one day and I was like, that can't be right. That price cannot be remotely right at all. And if anybody's gone to Costco, you know that once you see the little star or asterisk in the upper right hand corner, you know it's like, oh, this isn't long for Costco World. It's
yeah.
on sale for a reason. They're trying to move it. And that's kind of whenever I put two and two together and I grabbed it and I was like, okay, cool. But that was my first time trying it, and it had come highly recommended from a few folks that I follow online that have watched their videos, with regards to how they do any kind of rub to, kind of make sure that it sticks to the actual meat itself, but also at the same time, just from a flavor profile standpoint, I was really impressed. It doesn't go with everything. I will say that it's very niche, and the weird thing is you have to like taste it first. You go, oh, I can see this going well with X, or I can see this going well with this meat or this meal over here. Outside of that, I think that if as long as you are kind of up the middle, you're not trying to do anything specific. Most barbecue sauces themselves have about the same type of flavor profile, consistency, you name it. So if you're a budget-minded person, you can go with Sweet Baby Ray's, or you
Yeah.
can go with anything like along the lines of quote unquote lower on the grocery store shelves. You're gonna get the same type of output. Or if you really want to, you can sit down and look at the copycat recipes on, your Pinterest or your social media of whatever you choose and make your own. You'll probably pay more doing it that way because, you're benefiting from a sauce company doing it in bulk, but yeah, there it is.
Now that with the truff sauce, they got different varieties, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Now, would you go with the main buffalo? Is it called buffalo or what is it?
The four pack that I got had one that was truffle infused olive oil,
Ooh.
another was a habanero, one was a buffalo. I might be misremembering the buffalo. I think it was buffalo, and then the other was a jalapeno. And I haven't opened the jalapeno one yet, but for all intents and purposes, the others were fantastic. Obviously, you're going to use like olive oil for like specific things like cooking or making sure your stuff is ready to go on the grill type of thing. But yeah, it's. I thought they were great.
When I come down, we're busting out the jalapeno. That sounds good.
Okay,
We'll have to try that. We'll have to try that together.
you
So
got it.
about the marinades. So let's talk about marinades. So um, this is, I mean, I'm not the biggest cook in the world, and this is also kind of probably a basic, goofy question, but what is the whole process of marinating? You're basically taking your meat, put it in the sauce, and then just put it in the refrigerator, or do you find that you actually have to work the sauce in, work it out? I mean, what's the process of marinating? And then also let's talk about some of your favorite marinades.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was mentioning like earlier was that you have that overnight dry brine or an overnight brine. That's essentially the same thing. You're marinating that meat overnight inside of a cooled environment to just let the sauce or the spice or the salt, whatever, penetrate the meat as much as possible so that way, whenever you do put it on the grill, it's retaining more of that moisture. It's more tolerant of any kind of mistakes that you may make with a spike in temperature or anything like that. And you can go down the road of saying like, okay, cool. Well, say for example, I want to do, and Christine doesn't like lemon in chicken or poultry or anything like that. So like if I was going to do a lemon herb type of situation, that would be me cutting up, lemons and along with lemon juice, in addition to adding the meat to it with salt and water and all that stuff and letting it sit inside of that environment overnight. I'd like actually in that type of situation, probably 48 hours. That's just a me preference. But, at the end of the day, you can take any of these, sauces or things like that. Marinades tend to be a little bit thinner. Like if you go down just your grocery store aisle and look at the difference between a sauce and a marinade, you'll pick up the marinade bottle and it will be more like salad dressing consistency, be a
Yeah.
lot thinner, higher water content, but that's kind of trying to get more bang for your buck along with the same lines of, well, you don't want it too thick because you want it to surround the meat and be able to have that salt content and all of those other herbs and spices and things like that to be able to get into those meats for it to actually, demonstrate that flavor profile once you actually cook it.
Yeah, and so overall, you can marinate for quite a while. I mean, you're saying 48 hours. You could probably do it for 72, correct?
You start to lose any kind of efficiencies gained at that point. The only reason for like a lemon herb type of thing that I want a little bit longer on is because I just want to get as much out of it as I can.
And
But they've done scientific studies on like the amount of time that you're getting beneficial results from it. And it's just like making a cup of coffee. Whenever you make a cup of coffee, and I'm not talking about like the drip one where it's dripping over the top and just kind of go, it's like a French press, the one that, that I make on a daily basis. Your curve of how much you're getting out of it goes like this, has a steep kind of like drop. So the amount of efficiency and caffeine and flavor that you're getting out of it, slows as you go on. That's why it's like, well, anything over 4 minutes whenever I'm doing a French press is irrelevant at that point. Then it's going to start pulling out the negative, flavors of it. That doesn't happen in this instance, but just in the case of like your efficiency is not going to be there. So you're just wasting time at that point.
is there a marinade that you've wanted to try that you've like heard about that you're like, man, this actually would sound pretty good to soak it in that you haven't tried?
Not that I've not tried because I'd love to do al pastor on the grill, and I love that in burritos, tacos.
Ooh,
It's
yeah.
fantastic, and the way that, and there are a variety of different ways to do it, and you can see people doing it online, but the one that I've wanted and found to be just really interesting is to use the rotisserie that I mentioned earlier, have everything stacked up on it, and as it kind of proceeds to cook, treat it like just carve off that outside layer and let the inside layer continue to cook. But that's a lot of work. That's one that I'm just like, I'll have to, that will be a whole day and meal, kind of just around that whole thing.
Have you thought about like we were mentioning burgers and different things you like can you with the your grill and even like big eggs can you put like bread and like tortillas on there for just a couple minutes to give it like a warm or would you say that might be too hot for those? I didn't know.
No, no, just like it just depends upon what you're doing. Because if, for example, you wanted to put like your burger buns on there as you're cooking, your hamburgers and stuff like that, so you have a crispy bun for everything, you can absolutely do that. It's just a matter of time and exposure. Because if you're getting too low close to those flames, yeah, you could catch your bread on fire, but
Oh
if
yeah.
you're up far away enough from it, you should be fine. It's just amount of time that it sits on there. And that's one of those things where you do have the difference in kind of like, oh, am I making a smash burger? Is this going to be super fast, very quick, and it's going to be over within probably 3.5 minutes? Or am I trying to make like the Chili's, old timer burger, whatever, that's a thicker patty and wants to stay in one piece, then you're going to have a little bit longer time. So you just have to kind of balance what else you have going on, which that's one big thing with this is that, with everything you have going on within a grill, within a cook, doesn't matter. You always have to have a plan, and you always have to be sure that you are executing everything else within said plan. The one thing that I figured this out like early on was that whenever I did steak sliders with beer cheese and then smoked mac and cheese, all from scratch, with the exception of the actual noodles themselves, is that okay, I need to balance very carefully what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and what else is going to be impacted. Because what you don't want to be doing is running around like a chicken with your head cut off,
Oh
because
yeah.
then you start to forget things and lose things.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like you don't want to have too much going on. You want to be able to keep it all monitored. So, now let's get into smash burgers. So, I know what a smash burger is, but why do you feel like those have become so popular? Just, I mean, what is the? It's pretty much you're just smashing the burger down to get more of the juices in there and the more of the flow, or like what would you say the reasoning is that? Because some people just love a big, thick burger, and some like a smash burger. I've had both. I like both, but I feel like smash burger's been kind of more the trending thing.
I don't think it's been a trending thing, and I think part of it, and this is my opinion, I don't have anything um, kind of research driven or anything like that to kind of lean on with it. But I think that smash burgers, especially originating from a flat top grill, is quintessential American culture
Gotcha.
because of the diner presence in the early mid-ish 20th century. Don't have, like I said, zero empirical evidence to point to that, but that's the reason why things like Steak and Shake are still around.
Yeah.
They have a diner feel. They do smash burgers. They've done that since day one. And the flip side of it is, why do I think that it's not? I don't think it's trendy, but I think part of the reason why they are so good in comparison to um, thick burgers is the Maillard reaction, which is a reaction to get that char onto the outside. That's what gives you that crispiness of that smashed patty, is that reaction taking place. And, that imparts a specific flavor. And to your point, yeah, a thick, juicy burger is great. It's fantastic, but there's nothing like you can't get that same type of, well, you technically you can, but you're not going to get the same consistency out of it that you would with a smash burger.
And I feel like with a smash burger, I will say I feel like you get more taste of the toppings that are on the burger compared to when you have a thicker burger. You're tasting, mainly the meat and bread, and then probably the top sauce. I mean, you definitely are tasting it all. But I'm saying I feel like that smash burger kind of gives you a full out feel with it. I also I love the burger joint that y'all taking me to in Nashville, Jack Brown's, where it's like it's
Yep.
a literally I call it like a palm burger. It's so perfect. Now you would consider that burger just a regular burger, right? Or would that be?
Yeah. I mean, I know that they've done smash stuff in the past, but they generally are working with, to your point, smaller patties and more curated everything. Like everything from the toppings to the bun and everything. And I can't recommend them enough. They are fantastic.
Yeah, shout out to
Them
Jack
and
Brown's in Nashville.
Yeah, Jack Brown's. We've gone to the one downtown for years since they opened. They're fantastic. The other burger place, if you're ever visiting Nashville, that's fantastic, is ML Rose. They are remarkably consistent across all of their locations. So I feel confident, even though we predominantly go to two of them, that if you go to any of them, they should be. You're going to have a good experience either way.
And it's a vibe. ML Rose is a vibe. Like it's a good place to go. You could be hungover in the morning. You could
Yeah.
just go to watch sports. You might just go to take someone out to eat, do whatever. It's always a cool vibe, cool bar thing. All the servers are super cool, and the parking's always a great situation. So shout out to ML Rose as well. Great burgers down in Nashville. I'm gonna shout out to a Louisville burger place here, WW Cousins. That's my favorite burger place. I think it's the best burger in all of Louisville. It's actually been on the Food Network back in the day. It got a top 50 burger in the United States at one time. So they do it great. You can put any topping you want on the burger. And they're another place. Always a great vibe. Only one spot, but you go and you just feel like, man, this is comfortable. This is great food. And then that's where we were talking about earlier. I like to grab some Lowry's seasoned salt at the end of the condiment bar, load up my fries, and it goes great with some barbecue sauce. I love a good barbecue sauce. So let me ask you this. What is your favorite barbecue sauce? Is it Sweet Baby Ray's or would you say more of a smoking the kind of.
I don't have a favorite really. And whenever I say that, I generally tend to think of it in the context of what else am I having with this? Because what I don't want is the sauce to be the actual standout item on the plate. It needs to complement the meat that's actually there. It needs to pair well with everything else. You know, if it's a side, if it's a drink, you name it. What I don't want is it to be like knock your socks off and that's it. Like I don't note the consistency and flavor of the protein. I don't, note exactly how that pairs well with the sides. So it's very situational dependent. And, it's there. I won't disparage and, kind of name any sauces that I'm like, I absolutely avoid this one
Yeah.
just because I don't want anybody's, to be offended or anything like that. But there is a list in my mind that if I see it, in the store shelf or sitting on a table, I'm like, really, guys, that's the one you went with,
Yeah.
and then just kind of like start to question my decision of patronizing a place to begin with. But that's yeah, neither here nor there.
And I'll say this: I've been a barbecue guy my whole life. I've tried the nicer barbecues, the ones you have at a restaurant, like we're talking about Montgomery Inn. I've even gone back. I've had Bullseye and those kind of barbecues. The one that had the bull on it and like the Heinz barbecue sauce.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You can tell with those, they're just quicker made, not as much love put into them. They'll do the trick, they'll do the job. There might be good for like a little sauce box you got at a fast food joint. But yeah, when it comes to barbecue, I like a good sauce that I can heat up, goes good with it. I also I love barbecue chicken pizza. I love a good barbecue sauce on.
Really?
Yeah, so I love shout out to California Pizza Kitchen of all places. If you are a frozen pizza,
Huh.
grab one of their barbecue chicken pizza. It comes with chicken. It's a barbecue base, got really good cheese on it, and it comes with onions. So the combo of onions, chicken, barbecue sauce, and then kind of on a thinner crust, it's just phenomenal. And some people, of course, will do bacon and add meat and
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
but that barbecue chicken with cheese and onion, it really hits the spot. So I love a good barbecue sauce on that. And also another thing that sounds crazy, but what really goes well with barbecue is stuffing. Thanksgiving stuffing, like
I
stovetop
could see it.
or homemade stuffing, anything. If you put like a little barbecue sauce aside, just kind of dip your fork in it when you're eating it, it just goes well with the mixture. And I think onions just so important. Like we were talking about garlic earlier, onion
Yeah.
really hits spot. I'm a big onion fan. I love having it, in my stuff. So it goes well with that sauce. And I wanted to ask you, so we were talking, I've had your macaroni and cheese. It's phenomenal. Have you been trying any sides on the grill? Is there any side like it? What does the grill? Trying to think of the best way to say it. Cook sidewise, like beans, macaroni. Is there anything that you've tried or recommend?
Nothing. So I mentioned the smoked mac and cheese earlier. The great thing about that is that you don't necessarily, and this is a little hack for anybody who may have a propane grill. If they are looking to try and get some of
Oh,
the oh, if they're trying to get some of the benefits out of that in the same kind of realm, they can go and get that pellet smoking tube that I was talking about and go get pellets and then they just light one end on fire, put it on one side of the grill with the heat turned on, and put their mac and cheese or whatever over on the side and lift it up just a little bit. They could prop it up just to allow some of that airflow. Then they will be able to get the same benefit of having, not necessarily having a smoker, so to say, but they would be able to get the same type of flavoring on it. So that's a little bit of a hack. I did that with wood chips. And that's basically why I have a ton of wood chips still, is that I just bought them, kept buying them throughout the years, and doing that is kind of a hack without having room, on our patio back at our old apartment for anything like that. But there are ways to get the same indirect type of cooking methodology with that. So I do recommend that for folks. But cheese, to loop back, is one of those that really can take a good smoky flavor. Um, it's not one that I've done with things like I've thought about green bean casserole because that has obviously the fried onions on top, which would be able to take that smoke flavor as well. Um, I could see it with
what
stuffing.
about Brussels sprouts? You think that would
Brussels sprouts. I mean,
potentially
I
maybe? Or
I
like
I
even
would
corn.
be
What about that corn that sometimes you see that corn, it looks like it's a little blackened, like not
so
corn.
that's all over live fire. So
Okay,
that
over my
that char, that street corn that you're seeing, which that's why I was pausing for a moment because most vegetables, would benefit from doing, things like live fire cooking where you're exposing it directly to that heat, which I would have no problem. I've basically done stuff in the past where I would have half of my charcoal basket pushed back doing a rotisserie chicken, and I just throw some potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil down at the bottom.
ooh.
And that way, yeah, it's like they're getting that heat, they're cooking a lot faster. And my general note for potatoes like that is stab them with a fork all over, rub them with olive oil, salt, wrap them up in aluminum foil, throw them down there. Just let them ride. They'll
That's
be
awesome.
great.
That sounds great. So, what about cornbread?
Yeah, I was thinking to myself whenever you asked that about other things, like I mentioned stuffing, and I can think of all those other types of things that would be imparting that smoky flavor. Now, it would really depend upon the bread in and of itself, what else was in it, what your preferences are. So if I were to do something like a jalapeno cornbread, I would be like, okay, well, I want the jalapeno flavor to come through, but what I don't want is it to conflict or get in the way of the smoky flavor. So I'd be conscious about like what kind of smoke or wood that I would be using in that type of situation, which like I mentioned, you can go like up the middle with hickory. That's one that's just kind of tried and true. It works. But if you want to use one of the other fruited ones, like or the apple, cherry, or a pecan, I would recommend some experimentation with it first. I recommend experimenting first before you serve anybody, but that's my personal opinion, just me being me. I don't want to serve garbage to somebody or have a bunch of people waiting around going, well, we'll see if this one works.
Oh, dude, you always hit the spot, man. Your food's always been great. I love your macaroni. I love, like I said, anything you cooked on the grill. It's always hit the spot. Definitely, when I'm trying, my goal is, I know I've said this a few trips when I've come down, trying to still get some Kentucky bison. I actually talked to some people at work and found a way that there's a few places in town that might sell it. Also, too, I know. I believe Kroger and maybe potentially Myers has some. I also want to check out Costco and see if they potentially have it. But I know it'd be a thicker meat and be a little bit more uh, time to cook. But I think it would go, it just would be such a great burger. Like shout out to Burger Girl here in Louisville. They make a bison burger. Buckheads, who's no longer around, had a great bison burger. Bison burger just goes really good. I actually this is the way I like. I'm one of these guys. I love all the toppings in the world, but on a bison burger, I love lettuce, onion, barbecue, and that's it. And I'll put pepper jack cheese on it. I think pepper jack cheese on the bison burger is great, but sometimes just having the plain bison burger it just has such a good taste, and it's also just a healthier, leaner kind of meat. I mean, it's just really good. So, have you
Is
had
this?
bison?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had bison before. I think the first time that I had there's a whenever I worked for Apple and was out in Cupertino. This was for like 15 years ago or so. There was a restaurant out there that they would bring you like your protein of choice, your sides, and then a like superheated lava rock.
Ooh.
And the idea was that you put your meat onto the lava rock and you cooked it yourself like a Korean barbecue place would. And it was super cool. And they had the exotic stuff. They had bison. I think they had ostrich whenever I was out there. They had a few other things. Um, but at the end of the day, COVID kind of took them out, which is unfortunate because I always thought it was a really cool place.
Oh, dude, that sounds awesome because there's a place in Louisville called Game, and you go and you get kangaroo burgers, you can get ostrich, you can get emu, you can get they got wagyu, they got wild boar, deer, bison, regular stuff. So it's always good. They also have an appetizer, it's bone marrow, so you can get the bone marrow, put it on the bread. So their spot really hits, but having those exotic burgers, I'm one of those guys. I like to try anything, so I will say kangaroo burger is phenomenal. Love gator. I would love to see like having a potential a gator burger be cool, but I also just think trying those exotic meats, they all have like a different type to them. Like elk is a little bit more to me like stringer, a little bit more thinner. Then you got your kangaroo burger. It seems like a thicker burger. So very interesting. I know there's other burgers and wild stuff out there and around the world. So I always wonder like, is there a lion burger? Like I don't know. Like who knows? Probably somewhere. So you never know.
Somebody's probably done it, whether or not it's in alignment with, local regulations or not. We'll never know. That's probably some under the table type of stuff that we're seeing. But one thing I wanted to ask you is that is this meat already ground or is it just coming in like a slab of beef? Because I do have a grinder downstairs that we, hooks up to the KitchenAid if we need to, like, want to make like a ground burger of this. But
That might be
the
what we have
one
to do.
thing,
That might be what we have to
the
do.
one thing the one thing you're going to have to work, in that whole context is like you said, it is a leaner cut of meat. And if you get too lean of a meat, it runs the risk of drying out. So there is a delicate balance that we have to strike with that type of thing. I'll do some research and poke around and see what people recommend. And there's usually some sort of like, oh, you're going to want to go get this from the grocery store. It could be, going to or to your local butcher and asking for any kind of fatty pieces that you can add into this to add a little bit more of that, kind of umami flavor to it. So
Because the ones I've seen, it's almost like a steak almost, and so I feel like you'd have to get into burger form. But I do believe there's ones that sell like burgers. That's where I got to try to explore and find it more. I feel like now that I have this new job, I literally drive past this awesome butcher shop in Louisville. I've been in there before for like a plate lunch, but it's called Kingsley's, and I need to go in there and actually see because I've seen before on their menu they've had bison before, so to wonder if it's in burger form or if it's like more of a steak patty. Now, I feel like at Kroger and these other places that have had bison come in, it's more of the steak form like that. So the last question I got for you about grilling overall, and I know we could go on and on about grilling. So because you and I feel like every time we link, we're always talking about cooking, grilling. I'm always just mind blown about the whole experience. Do you feel like once you get a grill and the world is an internet place now. Do you find a really strong community with these grills? And like you mentioned earlier, like people you follow on YouTube and stuff, that people talk about it and share recipes and secrets.
100%. One of the biggest things that you'll find, especially in the Kamado space, and I know that like offsets have a space as well, but a lot of it is this Venn diagram of everybody overlaps. And yeah, we have niche communities where I can go in and see like, oh, what are these people talking about in the Big Green Egg forum or the Kamado Joe forum or you name it. Anytime people do that and or they come with questions like, hey, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm hitting this wall. What's happening? And you can tell that gauged upon like the question that they are asking, you can determine like, oh, you've not seen a stall before. You don't know that this is like something that does tend to happen. And a lot of people have meaningful commentary and supportive things that really say, hey, here's what you're probably doing. Or if somebody comes over and says, hey, I've cooked X, Y, and Z 4 times, every single time, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Somebody help. Generally, people are really, really awesome about saying, hey, here's what you should tend to look at, and either it's solved in that forum and people link back over to it and say, hey, we actually talked about this probably 2 or 3 years ago, and people will reference back to that. And specifically the community that I'm talking about here, just so that way everybody's clear, this is Reddit. I'm talking about Reddit. That's a community of like people who will be able to help you understand what's going on in a very meaningful way. That being said, it's like I know that a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's it's political." I get it. Set that aside. We're just looking at the grilling in and of itself right
Yeah.
now. You can find a lot of people on there that will point you in the right direction, and if they don't have the answer, generally they will say, "Hey, you need to go watch these videos to figure out what you may or may not be doing right or wrong." Because we're not there with you. We can't see how you're preparing everything. We can't see how you're setting up your grill. we don't have enough to really make a judgment call on what you should do. So there's really a lot of support there. It's what you would think of like, oh, they're sharing recipes. People don't tend to do that. They kind of say, a lot of people will figure this out. Here's your baseline, kind of the one that I mentioned up at near the top of like, hey, salt, pepper, garlic, onion, paprika, and cayenne pepper. That's where you start. Tweak it to your heart's desire, or go out and buy somebody else's. And, just say, hey, go look up that general stuff, but we're here to solve these problems that may or may not be happening. Another side is talking about like the hardware of it. Like, hey guys, how often do you tighten your bolts on your grill? Because like I mentioned, there's two halves. There's a base and there's a top, and they're held together by metal bands. How often should I tighten those? What, should I tighten them to? Because the manufacturer doesn't want to tell you to tighten to a certain, Newton meter or foot pound or anything like that, because these grills exist in different climates at different elevations. They're exposed to different things. And the thing about ceramics is they can expand and contract. And you don't want to, expose too much force to something that could be hot. You'll crack it. And those types of things are just really, really good conversation starters in that space. Like I mentioned, you can go to YouTube. YouTube has a bunch of great resources, just something for
Who's some
your
of your
listeners to
favorite YouTubers for grilling?
Yeah. One to start off with, if you're really looking at the Kamado style grill, is a Canadian guy. Smoking Dad Barbecue is the handle, and his name is James. But literally, like, he is my go-to first person to start with whenever I'm like, okay, has he done this before? Like if I'm considering cooking something net new, like whenever I just did the beef ribs of, a month or however long ago it was, and I think I sent you pictures of it.
Yeah.
But it was, they were fantastic. It's like I was not expecting to be, have my socks knocked off like that. But, it's, I go to him and see like, okay, cool. What are the gotchas? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? And generally speaking, I already know what I'm kind of looking for in a good cut of meat. And this is where I'm going to give my shameless plug to, hey, if you have a local butcher, go to your local butcher. If you are doing any of this, or you care about the quality of the meat that you're getting, your local butcher is generally going to be the one that's sourcing it from local farms, from people who have a family business, who are not these big corporate overlords that do this horrendous huge scale farming, but they are really impacting the lives of those within your community. Highly recommended. And not only that, but they have a lot of the other cuts of meat that you may not necessarily find at a Costco, Kroger, Publix, Walmart, things like that. Yeah, those places will have the common stuff, but if you're looking for something super niche, something specific, you're wanting to, get
Certain
something
cut,
really nice.
certain cut, maybe. Yeah, like a certain
Yeah, yeah, specifically, yeah. And that's the other thing, is that if they don't have it, 9 times out of 10, if you say, hey, I will buy it if you get it, they will generally do that, especially if you go there frequently.
Yeah.
And back whenever we used to live on that side of town, I would go there all the time, even for stuff that we would get on a regular basis. Not so much anymore since we moved to the other side of town, but for anything like that with like a beef rib, I went to them and they were like, "Oh, our saw's, turned off." I'm like, "Good, I don't want it cut. I want it in one piece. Bring it to me in one piece, please. Thank you."
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So I got to say, Jim, you were phenomenal. You're always an amazing guest. I love talking cooking with you. I appreciate all the information, and I know I'll have you on in the future again, and we'll talk about more cooking and another topic. Before we sign off and do our sign offs, I want to ask a question because your wife asked me to ask. So, a music genre I'm not too familiar with. What are some of your favorite emo artists and ones you don't like?
I won't say the ones I don't like. I will start off by saying, and again, as always, thank you so much for having me. By the way, in case I don't get to say that, but
Of course, bro.
the one thing that people think, and I'm getting this out of the way, like just at the top here, people think the teased out hair that's crazy way out here, the really tight pants and armbands and all this other shit is emo. Like there's this wild misconception about what emo actually is, and to not go too in depth with it, but emo was an offshoot of punk.
Hmm.
That's what it was and still is. Um, but it was not, and I'm trying to kind of thread this needle of like what it is, what it isn't type of thing. Um, because and again, like the bands that I really like are the ones from like that got going in the late '90s. That was like the coming of age time for me, as well as like being exposed to folks that were going to shows and stuff like that. You kind of got a sense of like, oh, what was happening in this like burgeoning scene that kind of ultimately gave birth to what everybody saw in the early 2000s if they were listening to rock music at the time. So, the key indicators would be like if anybody's ever heard of Taking Back Sunday, they're not an emo band, but they're the product of what that whole genre started to do in the 90s. And so the bands that I traditionally kind of lean on for that are like Jimmy Eat World,
Oh yeah,
Death
great.
Cab for Cutie. And, yeah, you can listen to both of those bands and say, well, I'm listening to their latest record. This doesn't sound like what you're describing as, guitar driven, emotionally driven lyrics that are an offshoot of punk. This doesn't sound like that. Go back and listen to their first records, like in the the mid 90s, and you will hear that that is a quintessential sound. And, everybody has their own, no pun intended, voice, structure, architecture of how they actually compose everything. But traditionally, it exists in this Venn diagram of like, oh, okay, cool. I hear it. It makes sense to me. But for those that are out there looking at like My Chemical Romance, Chemical Romance is not an emo band. They are 100% not. They may be adjacent to the genre. They may have some in, parts of their structure and how they actually voice things that make sense that you could say, oh, I can see where they're pulling some stuff from the emo genre, but they're not technically an emo band. So it's a wild misconception whenever I see like people post online a picture of some, and we call them scene kids, those people with the crazy hair, piercings and tattoos and all this other shit, which is fine. It's like, yeah, I have gauged ears too. It's fine. But just kind of the over the top, and blah, I equate it to these people that are doing that are the hair metal people of music at the time.
Yeah.
Just so over the top. Like, okay, cool. I get it. You're trying to do, shock people into like, oh, that's wild, man.
Well, I think that's a perfect explanation, and I promised Christine I would get that question in. So I know this whole episode, people listening are like, "You went from barbecue and cooking to emo," but I had to ask Jim. Jim is great with music. Jim is a musician, so somebody I definitely want to talk to. So that might be something too we talk about in a future episode where we break down more of the music. And I know you and I will probably randomly talk about it down the road. So definitely, thank you for answering that. Had to do that for Christine, my sister in
Yep.
your life. But I want to thank you again for coming on. You're great. You always deliver on a podcast. You always have good input and answers. So thank you for that. Jim's not the biggest social guy, or not social guy, social media guy, like I said. So reach out to me if you got any questions. I'll get to Jim. I talk to Jim and Christine on a daily basis. So I'll hit the group chat up and I'll get you whatever info. Jim's the nicest guy in the world. So if you got a question, he's going to be happy to answer. And if he doesn't have the answer, he'll get you pointed in the right direction. But vibingwithsleazy.com is the website. Just updated it. 90% done. Shout out to AJ Thomas. I'll do more shouting out about it here later in the season, but the website is incredible. It is beautiful. It has been updated. So check it out, vibingwithsleazy.com. You can check me out on Facebook, Instagram. Listen to it on all the platforms. And again, I apologize for people that it's been a week, but I've had a cold. I'm still battling it and still getting through it and got a new job. But feeling good, ready to keep pumping out episodes. But this one was a lot of fun. And again, Jim, thank you for coming on. But everybody, this is season 6, episode 9. Jim Dalton, Hendersonville, Tennessee. We are out. Peace. Thank you, brother.